my pet peeve about the way we sometimes talk about keeping Shabbat is that we say we don't work on Shabbat. And that's simply not true. It's not that we refrain from doing work, something that's hard or makes you sweat, but that there are particular things we don't do that are creative. So, picking up a pen and writing, it's not very hard work. Or boiling a pot of water, really easy work. Gluing pieces of paper together. It's not work, but it is creativity. And the Torah, the halakha, the Jewish law forbids us from melechet machshevet, creative labor, creative activity on Shabbat. And so that pen is creating an indelible mark, and the water is a chemical change, from liquid to gas. These are things that symbolize creativity, human creativity, that on Shabbat we step back from because we recognize God as the creator of the world. And so we refrain from creating on Shabbat. The categories of these creative activities or creative labors, the 39 melachot, stem from the work that was done, or the creative activity that was done in building the Mishkan, building that tabernacle in the desert. I like to say it's the very first synagogue, the very first sacred space. And it's based on all of the labors that were necessary to create that space and create even the offerings or the bread, the baking, all of these different aspects of what the Mishkan, what the tabernacle needed. That's how we define what is creative. That's how the rabbis understood milacha, creative labors. And in this week's parasha, in Naso, we reach a very significant moment where the Mishkan is finally completed and put to use, and the first offerings are brought from all of the tribes, all of the Nisim, all of the heads of the tribes. And the text says, "Vayihi b'yom kalot," when the completion of the Mishkan had been achieved. The word kalot is similar to the word that we see in the creation of the world. Vayechulu, lechalot, complete. Vayechulu hashamayim va'aretz. We will recite tonight at our Friday night Kiddush. Vayechulu, that God completed the work, that God completed the creation of the world. And our creation in the Torah is the creation of the Mishkan, of this sacred space for God. And the Midrash on those words says something really beautiful and really remarkable about the completion of this labor. It says, "Davar shelo haya," something that had not come to be, mishenivra ha'olam ad achshav, from the day that the world was created up until now. Na'asa be'oto hayom, was created, was accomplished on that day. On that day, the day that the Mishkan was finally in use, was the first time, or the only time since creation, that something special was created, was made possible. And the Midrash goes on to explain the name of Rav, Mishenivra ha'olam ve'ad ota sha'ah, from the moment that the world was created until that moment, lo sharta shchina batachtonim, God's presence did not dwell in the lower realms on earth. Ela mishehukam hamishkan be'elach, but from the moment that the Mishkan was built, and then on, that God's presence came to rest in earth. So before, God was maybe somewhere else in the heavens, and now human beings created a way for God to be here with us on earth. And that was the Mishkan, where the Shekhinah, we say the Mishkan, the Shekhinah, these are words that are also related. God's presence rested in the Mishkan, rested among the people. That, of course, Moses could speak to God from within the ark that was in the Mishkan, that the Holy of Holies was a place that the Kohen Gadol could access even just once a year on Yom Kippur, but that we could feel God in our midst in a new way. And that's only because of human creativity. Something that hadn't happened since the world was created. So God created the world, and then humans caused God to inhabit the world all this time later. And so our creation brings God close. It's that we have some kind of autonomy over God. It's a very daring sort of statement that we can influence God, so to speak. This past week, I completed my class series. We've been looking at really fantastical, beautiful, mystical tales in the Talmud through the lens of the book written by Ruth Calderon. The book is called A Bride for One Night. In her final story, her final Talmud story that she takes a series of excerpts from the Talmud and she creatively interprets them very beautifully. The final one is this story of Yishmael, Rabbi Yishmael, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. And the story goes, this is in the times of the Second Temple, toward the very end of the Second Temple era, that Yishmael went into the Holy of Holies and beheld none other than God's presence. And God turned to Yishmael and said, "Yishmael, my son, bless me." That God needed something from this human being. And Yishmael is taken aback. What do you mean? I'm here to bless God? I'm here to ask forgiveness from God. I'm here to, in awe and inspiration to feel the power of God. But no, God says, bless me. And so Yishmael, sort of thinking on his feet, comes up with a beautiful blessing to God, that your mercy may overcome your anger. God, I bless you, Yishmael says, that you should act toward your children, toward your people with mercy and not with anger or strict justice. And I'm so touched by this idea that God needs us, that God accomplished, so to speak, the creation of the world, the canvas, and God needs us now to add the new creativity onto it and to bring godliness into the world and even to bring God's blessing into the world. And that is the power of what humans can do. Now, on Shabbat, we take a step back from our human creativity. We recognize that it all stems from God, our talents, our gifts, the raw materials that we use, our wits, our power of speech. Look, everything comes from God. So we press pause on that for Shabbat. We don't create. But then we enter into our work week with a newfound zest and zeal for our creative potential. And that creative potential has a spiritual element to it. On Shabbat, we cease to create so that our creativity should be infused with Shabbat, with the spirituality of the day, with our neshama yeterav, with that extra soul, that extra zing that we got over Shabbat. So the next time someone tells you, oh, we don't work on Shabbat, you can correct them. You can say, we don't create on Shabbat. But the power of human creation is to bring that Shabbat atmosphere into the rest of the world, to bring godliness from somewhere else, the time of creation, into the here and now. And I bless you and I bless us all that we should find ways to infuse our creations, our meetings, our conversations, everything with an element of spirituality, of godliness, with a sense that this is our mission in creation and that God in some way is depending on us to fill the world with blessing. Shabbat Shalom.